أهلا بكم مشاهدينا إلى هذه الحلقة الجديدة من مستقبل الطاقة. هذه ملفاتنا. شركة نيوم للهيدروجين الأخضر، كيف تنظر إلى مستقبل الوقود الأخضر؟ مضاعف الطاقات المتجددة 3 مرات بحلول عام 2030 سيتطلب متابعة سنوية لهذه الجمود لضمان الالتزام. الهيدروجين النظيف من المتوقع أن يلعب دورا مهما في عملية تحول الطاقة مستقبلا، خاصة في القطاعات الصناعية التي يصعب خفض الانبعاثات فيها. كما يمكن للهيدروجين أن يشكل حلا لتقطع الطاقات المتجددة من خلال استخدامه في تخزين الطاقة. في كوب 28 تم إطلاق عدد من المبادرات الخاصة بالهيدروجين لوضع معايير وأسس لسوق الهيدروجين النظيف وتسريع جعل الوقود تجاريا. من بين تلك المبادرات إعلان النوايا من قبل الحكومات للاعتراف المتبادل بشهادات الهيدروجين ومشتقاته. أكبر مشروع للهيدروجين الأخضر في العالم يتم تشييده اليوم في مدينة نيوم، ومن المفترض أن يبدأ الإنتاج عام 2026. وللحديث عن مستقبل الهيدروجين الأخضر والتحديات التي يجب التعامل معها، كنت قد التقيت الرئيس التنفيذي لشركة نيوم للهيدروجين الأخضر ديفيد أدمنسون، والذي بدأ أولا بإعطائنا تحديثا حول المشروع.
First of all, thank you for inviting me here. A pleasure to come and talk a bit about this project. So just by way of context, Neom Green Hydrogen Company, it's a joint venture. So there's 3 main shareholders, that's Air Products, Aqua Power and Neom. We actually have an off-taker as well, who is Air Products, and we have an EPC contractor who is also Air Products. So very much an integrated, collaborative joint venture, really focused on exporting green hydrogen to the marketplace. When complete, it'll export about 250,000 tons per year of green hydrogen. In the form of ammonia, so that's 1.2 million tons per year. In terms of where we are, we achieved financial close, which is something fairly extraordinary. Projects of this size have never been done before. This is the largest green hydrogen project that's ever been built. We achieved financial close in May this year. We kicked off quite a lot of the engineering and early procurement activities, in fact, at the beginning of 2022, with a lot of support from the shareholders. So all the main contracts have now been placed, the subcontracts have been placed. We're already starting to get equipment deliveries. So for example, early in October, the first 6 wind turbines arrived, the first 6 of 250, which are going up to the Gulf of Aqaba. So that's where our wind farm will actually be located. We've got a solar farm at a place called Shikri. This is all across Neom, where there'll be over 5 million solar panels there. And then the main process plant, which is down just south of Oxygen, where we'll be producing green hydrogen and converting that into ammonia.
Do you view green hydrogen as more of a national, regional play, or could the industry become global?
It's very much a global play. I mean, all the product that we're producing out of the Neom Green Hydrogen Company will be exported. So Air Products, as I mentioned, will be the sole off-taker. They've agreed to take all of the product we produce for the next 30 years. They'll be exporting it to global markets. They've already announced investments in receiving terminals in the UK, in the Netherlands and also in Germany. And that's expected to be the primary market, although it's suitable for exporting globally in any case. When we envisaged the project back in 2019, there was really no domestic market. There is a hydrogen market clearly in Saudi and across the region, but there was no real impetus to drive green hydrogen, whereas there was, certainly in the views of Air Products as the off-taker, certainly a nascent market, and increasingly they believe there will be a market for people who are prepared to pay for zero carbon or low carbon hydrogen in order to help them to abate their own businesses, their own processes, and particularly going to be useful in the hard to abate industries such as transportation.
Renewables cost has ticked up lately. Also, interest rates look set to be higher for longer. We've seen the impact of that on Neom as well, with the increase in the cost from around $5 billion to over $8 billion. Do you see that impacting in general the future of renewables and consequently having an impact on the rate of deployment of green energy?
So I mean, the cost of the capex that's referred to it is clearly a major contributor. The operating cost is almost as important. And as we were developing the project, and you made reference to, I think, the headline number of $5 billion, which was originally envisaged back in 2019, 2020 as the investment value, to a final number of about 8.4. At the time, that was the $5 billion was really around the EPC contract. We did go project finance. We did make some trade-offs between the capex and the opex because it made sense. So it helped to reduce our cost of producing ammonia. So those were good decisions that we made, and that's the whole purpose of actually running through a joint development at early works to actually do those trade-offs. But your point on the increasing cost of renewables, it is a concern. It will start to challenge some of the economics of new projects coming through. We've addressed some of that. I mean, in some ways we've been quite fortunate because although the cost of renewables has gone up during the project phase, it has also dropped considerably recently. So we've been able to take advantage of some of that in our procurement cycles. But the benefits of going at the scale we have, again, this is the largest green hydrogen project in the world, we've been able to drive down the cost of hydrogen and green ammonia as a result of that. But it will be challenging. I mean, the banking environment with the increasing interest rates will challenge new projects. I think the collaboration we've got between the joint ventures, you've got business and government all in the same joint venture. It's clearly going to require some support from governments around the world to say, if you really are committed to decarbonising the world, looking for green fuels, there will need to be some support, whether it's the support in addressing some of the increases in interest rates or potentially future subsidies or encouragement to industry to decarbonise. Then I think that will help continue to keep the momentum behind the investments.
Renewables today, David, are not being built at the rate needed to decarbonize the grid, let alone make green hydrogen. And we know green hydrogen is highly energy intensive. So do you think there's a risk with green hydrogen that could create an unhealthy competition between the green hydrogen sector and other sectors in the economy, where at the end more fossil fuels end up on the grid, and therefore we are reducing or even reversing the overall intended climate benefit of green hydrogen and renewables?
So I think it comes back to your previous question on, is there enough capacity in the marketplace around renewables? Can they address the demand? Whether it comes from the grid or whether it comes from green hydrogen, there's a huge demand. I mean, we should view that as a positive, because the reason there's a huge demand is because countries, governments are making the commitment to switch over from 100% reliable or largely reliable on fossil fuels into renewables. So I just think that's part of the journey. Clearly the demand for energy is going to continue to increase on a global basis, but we would expect the supply chains to continue to build out to address the needs. I mean, it's a market dynamic. If the demand is there, the supply has to grow. And you've seen the growth, the suppliers in the renewables market today are very different from what they were about 5-10 years ago. So I'd expect that to continue. It will be challenging. It may be a tight market for a while, but I don't necessarily see a trade-off and a reverting back to fossil fuels as a result.
What other uses do you reckon green hydrogen would be a major player in? So we know it could be an energy carrier and storage for power. We know it could be fuel for transport, and it also could be used in industrial processes.
So the main focus when we envisaged the project from an Air Products point of view, because they were looking at the end market. I mean, they supply hydrogen in the market in any case. They already have an established hydrogen for mobility business as well. So they're expecting the transportation market to really pick up. The real focus is really on buses and trucks, the heavy duty, and the cars are more challenging to get the economics to work. So buses, trucks, trains even, potentially into aviation or maritime as well. And then you're moving into steel, steel and cement. So those are the big industries, the hard to abate industries that are really putting the demand for green hydrogen out there, or certainly low carbon hydrogen out there. And with their commitments to achieving net zero, they are going to create that pull and the demand for hydrogen. And in some cases, you're absolutely right, there will be a price premium to pay. It does cost more to produce green hydrogen. We've addressed some of those challenges by going at such a large scale, but there will always be a higher cost to pay. But for those hard to abate industries, this is absolutely the way that they can address some of their commitments.
Do you foresee green ammonia to be the leading end use of green hydrogen?
I think there'll be a mix. I mean, I'm more familiar with the hydrogen market. I mean, we are producing hydrogen off our plant. We are converting it into ammonia, but that's mainly as an energy carrier. It's the most efficient way to transport green hydrogen to other parts of the world. The transportation of ammonia is well understood. There are ships already in place to do that. But there are end users who will use ammonia, whether it's in power plants, whether it's in fertilizer as well. And you can see that also changing. You know, as more demands are put on those industries to decarbonize, rather than breaking it back down to hydrogen, if they can use ammonia, that they would do.
Finally, let's talk about the electrolyzer part of the value chain, because there are varied electrolyzer technology out there, and what do you see, David, is really needed on that part of the value chain when we're talking about green hydrogen? Do we need a standardization of technologies? Do we need to fortify the supply chains of that part of the value chain?
I mean, I think, first of all, we need people to continue to invest in new technologies, to continue to innovate, to drive down the cost of electrolyzers. And a lot of the cost is around the metals that they use and how they use them to get the efficiency they need. I mean, with renewables, as we know, when the sun doesn't shine and the wind doesn't blow, there is no power. But you have to make maximum use of the energy when it's available. In the case of Neon, we're very fortunate because we've got excellent wind conditions. The wind actually increases once it gets dark, so we're able to make a high utilization rate of the electrolyzers. But the core technology, within the electrolyzers, is going to be important that people continue to focus on that. There are different technologies out of them. We're using the water alkali. There are PEM electrolyzers out there as well. There are higher pressure systems and lower pressure systems. I think there's space for quite a lot of them. When we did our evaluation, we went with TK Nucera. They had the most established supply chain. They had the best references. And we're looking for over 30 years of operation here. We will be, however, carrying out our own R&D, also in consultation and collaboration with TK Nucera, because having made the investment in the electrolyzers, we need to continue to work on them, and this is back to my comment earlier on about the operating costs. We're going to need to refurbish them, we're going to need to recoat them, we want to put the next generation coating on them. In order to do that, we need to carry out the technology tests in order to prove that before we issue it for commercial operation. So technology, absolutely vitally important, lots of options or several options around the technologies to be deployed, and it will depend on how those economics work for different applications in the future.
نتوقف مع فاصل قصير نتابع بعده في مستقبل الطاقة. هل ستقدر صناعة النفط والغاز على تصفير الميثان بحلول عام 2030 فعلاً؟ أهلا بكم من جديد. شكلت الطاقات المتجددة كنسبة من إجمالي قدرات إنتاج الكهرباء المركبة عام 2022 نحو 83% عالميا، فالانخفاض المتواصل لكلفة تلك التقنيات في السنوات الأخيرة جعلها منافسة للوقود الأحفوري في إنتاج الكهرباء في معظم بقاع الأرض. وقد تعهدت دول العالم في كوب 28 في دبي بمضاعفة قدرات الطاقات المتجددة 3 مرات بحلول عام 2030، إلا أن ارتفاع كلفة التمويل قد يكون أحد أبرز التحديات التي تقف في وجه تحقيق هذا الهدف. فما حجم هذا التحدي وكيف يمكن التعامل معه؟ هذا هو ما سألته للرئيس التنفيذي للتحالف العالمي للطاقات المتجددة بروس دوغلاس.
So first of all, we welcome the call to triple renewable energy by 2030 to at least 11,000 gigawatts. So we welcome that And we understand there's going to be a pledge announced here from a large number of countries calling for that target. But what we also need, and we call it ambition, action, and accountability. So the ambition is that pledge, so the call for a target, but we now need action, so implementation at country level to actually get it done. And the final piece is accountability, which is, the countries need to implement those actions in the countries, and we need a review process to monitor and report that annually so we can assess progress towards the targets leading up to 2030.
ولكن أسهم شركات الطاقات المتجددة والطاقات النظيفة في الولايات المتحدة الأمريكية خسرت خلال الأشهر الستة الأخيرة ما يقارب 30 مليار دولار من قيمتها السوقية. بطبيعة الحال الارتفاع في نسب الفائدة لعب دورا أساسيا في ذلك، ولكن كيف سيؤثر ذلك على انتشار الطاقات المتجددة وزيادة التدفق لرؤوس الأموال نحو هذا القطاع؟
Yeah, so high interest rates is of course a challenging environment for renewables, but also other sectors. You see interest rates affecting many other industries around the world. Of course, with renewables, we are very capital intensive, so there's a large capex upfront. And so what we need from governments is a long-term policy signals, so market signals, in order to give investor confidence for our developers to then install the renewable energy.
ولكن ماذا يحدث في قطاع طاقة الرياح البحرية؟ شهدنا في الأشهر القليلة الأخيرة بأن هناك العديد من إلغاء المشاريع، هناك مشاركات ضعيفة في المناقصات على مشاريع طاقة الرياح البحرية، هناك تخفيضات ضخمة جدا في قيمة الأصول لدى شركات مطوري الرياح البحرية ومنتجي توربينات الرياح. فبالتالي إضافة إلى ارتفاع تكلفة التمويل، ما هي العوامل السلبية الضاغطة على هذا القطاع؟
So offshore wind is an example of one of the renewable technologies which is large infrastructure projects. And you're right that the financing costs and the interest rates have had an effect, but as important, if not more important, is things like permitting. So we need accelerated permitting to enable that confidence to be built into the development of those wind projects. It currently takes longer in most jurisdictions to permit an offshore wind farm than it does to construct it. So that needs to be addressed urgently, and it's something that countries can do very quickly. We also need some strength and diversity in the supply chains. And these are not small industries. We're talking about turbine manufacturing, we're talking about vessels, ports, and a lot of infrastructure that needs that investment to flow.
خلال العقد الأخير العالم كان يسجل بشكل متكرر ودوري أسعار قياسية متدنية جديدة للطاقات المتجددة، وخصوصا بالنسبة للطاقة الشمسية الفوتوضوئية. هل تعتقد بأنه من الآن فصاعدا يجب على العالم أن يتعايش مع أسعار للطاقات المتجددة أسعار أعلى مما عهدناها سابقا؟
So firstly, the low renewable prices is a success story. Let's be honest. It's been incredible the way that we have reduced the cost of renewables. They are now cost competitive in almost all markets around the world against fossil fuels, and we see the benefits of that. We've seen records broken year on year in terms of the number of installations. But of course, as you mentioned, the interest rates have created, not just for renewables, but other industries, now an increasing price environment. I would say, in addition to that, we should also address the value of renewables. So we should recognize that renewables bring benefits beyond just climate. So I'm talking about energy security, reliable local power, access to affordable energy, jobs, and local investments. So there's significant benefits to the ramp up of renewables, and we would advocate for those investments to flow and the value of renewables to be recognized. In addition to that, it's important to note that fossil fuels, the investment in fossil fuels, one example is in the G20 this year, the annual increase in the subsidies to fossil fuels have doubled year on year, and we would advocate for those financial flows to be redirected to renewables and invest in a clean, just and secure transition.
مؤتمر الأطراف 28 في دبي أثمر تقدما مهما يخص مكافحة انبعاثات غاز الميثان الذي يعتبر من أهم الغازات المؤدية للاحتباس الحراري. فقد تعهدت 50 شركة نفط وطنية ودولية بخفض تلك الانبعاثات ووقف الحرق الروتيني للغاز وتسرباته بحلول عام 2030، حيث ستعلن تلك الشركات عن الخطط المفصلة لتحقيق تلك الأهداف عام 2025. فما أهمية هذا الإعلان من أكبر شركات النفط والغاز؟ هذا ما سألته للأمين العام لمنتدى الطاقة الدولي جوزيف ماكموناغل.
I think they've done a very successful job, and getting these 50 companies together on emissions and methane is a big deal. I mean, we went from companies being banned in Scotland. They were invited to Sharm el-Sheikh, but I think they were nervous about attending. What's it going to be like? And then I think Dr. Sultan and the presidency of the UAE, aggressively made outreach to try to convince them to come, not just to come, but also to make serious commitments. And that's a huge thing. I mean, I think they have to be part of COP for things like this, but also in future COPs to be able to scale up all these energy technologies that we're going to need to meet our climate goals. So it's a big deal. I also think the climate finance part of this is really not getting enough attention, and I think in particular the loss and damage thing is a big deal. But the bigger thing, in my view, is this Altera fund that the UAE announced that they're seeding with $30 billion. They hope to get it to $250 billion, and they want to focus on energy R&D, clean energy R&D, and energy technologies, which. The IEA net zero report gets a lot of attention, but they have this net zero technology, or this IEA technology report they also do. And it basically says wind and solar get us halfway. And that's very aggressive wind and solar, which we need. I'm all for it. But the other half has to come from new technologies that aren't commercialized or don't even exist yet. Like CCUS, like hydrogen, maybe fusion, maybe things we're not even thinking about. And that's really what this fund is targeting. And $250 billion, if they can achieve that, it's a huge deal, and that's not getting enough attention either.
Joe, you've mentioned in your prior response and alluded to the pledges that about 50 big oil and gas companies pledged to reduce their CO2 emissions. Another pledge was on methane. A lot of the attention is always drawn to CO2, but methane is also a very deadly gas with 80 times potency compared to CO2 in the first 2 or 3 decades. And that's a file that you at the IEF you've been following up on. Do you see the oil and gas sector easily, reaching those targets on methane, zeroing methane by 2030?
I do. I mean, I think the countries or the companies that signed up for it all have certainly the financial wherewithal and the technical expertise to implement it, and it's a very cost-effective, it's low-hanging fruit, let's say. I like to say, these COP meetings have previously been about chasing perfect solutions and get everyone to agree with it. But this is something where we can make immediate progress on meeting our climate goals and accelerate the progress if we address methane. And this is a tremendous start, not just what the companies are doing, but also what the countries are signing up for as well. Methane is in the NDCs of a lot of countries, but very few have targets in their NDCs. I think there's being much more attention now on that aspect of it. So we can make a lot of progress here, and not just progress, but accelerate the impacts that we could have on global warming if we're able to do it. I think the trick here is the developing world companies that would like to do it, but they need funding to help do it, which I think is being addressed, but also they need technical expertise as well. And so I think there might be another
initiative
that has to be started, because they'll gladly take the money, but they don't necessarily have the wherewithal or the engineering capabilities or just manpower, a bandwidth to be able to do it. So we have to figure that part out, but I think there are people addressing it. We started our methane initiative in 2021 and developed a measurement methodology, because you can't cut something if you can't measure it.
Absolutely.
And the measuring part was very challenging, and we worked with Kairos on satellite, using satellite technology. And that's already 2 years old, and there's even more fantastic satellite capabilities and tools available. So it's getting better. The tools are getting better to measure and to allow people to identify, companies and countries to identify where the weak links are and address it.
بهذا مشاهدينا نصل إلى ختام هذه الحلقة من مستقبل الطاقة. نلقاكم الأسبوع المقبل في نفس الموعد. إلى اللقاء.
لمتابعة المزيد من الأخبار والبرامج والقصص الإنسانية والوثائقيات والتقارير الإخبارية، لا تنسوا الاشتراك في قناتنا على يوتيوب، الضغط على زر الإعجاب وتفعيل جرس التنبيهات.